a young fan of the Kansas City Chiefs who donned their red and black colors on his face, as sports fans have done since the dawn of sports, nearly had his life ruined Nick Sammon style by Karen Phillips. Now, the image shown carefully hid the red side of the 12-year-old's face to make people believe that blackface had been worn. Phillips actually had the nerve to write, "It takes a lot to disrespect two groups of people at once." But on Sunday afternoon in Las Vegas, a Kansas City Chiefs fan found a way to hate black people and the Native Americans at the same time. Now, just imagine the evil and the vitriol that has to be present to write something like that about a kid excited at a football game. And imagine being a kid who's excited to see your favorite team play, not thinking anything about politics, only to later find out that some grown man was staring you down with malice in his heart and decided to pen a whole long screed fantasizing about you and fantasizing about the racist, evil family you must have been raised in. Because Phillips goes on to argue this nonsense too, quote, "While it isn't the league's responsibility to stop racism and hate from being taught in the home, they are a league that has relentlessly participated in prejudice. If the NFL had outlawed the chop at Chiefs games and been more aggressive in changing the team's name, then we wouldn't be here. This is what happens when you ban books, stand against critical race theory, and try to erase centuries of hate. You give future generations the ammunition they need to evolve and recreate racism better than before," end quote. What I've noticed about left-wing racists is that they are so obsessed with skin color to a degree of fanaticism that borders on clinical illness, that they just assume that everyone else thinks about race as much as they do. But we don't. Sadly, though, the squeaky wheel gets the oil and all that, and so those who are willing to be utterly obnoxious about these sorts of things, no matter how in the minority they are in terms of their ideology, will get to dictate the conversation and the news cycle for the rest of us, destroying lives and race relations in the process. This Karen Phillips guy managed to make things even worse for himself when responding to the criticism that his whole article only showed the black painted side of the kid's face and not the red side. He tweeted in response, quote, "For the idiots in my mention who are treating this as some harmless act because the other side of his face was painted red, I could make the argument that it makes it even worse. Y'all are the ones who hate Mexicans but wear sombreros on Cinco," end quote. I'd hate to live in the miserable world he's concocted between his own ears. What a depressing alternate reality he lives in daily. But if he really must insist on making this argument about racism and cultural appropriation and all that, then one memester summed it up perfectly when they said that the only thing this kid is guilty of is culturally appropriating Elizabeth Warren while wearing Trudeau face. Joining us now to discuss is Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. Robert, thanks for being here.
Always good to talk to you, Kara. Thank you.
Great. So this kind of smear attack makes me feel like I just went through some kind of a time warp to a few years ago when these hit pieces were constantly coming out. But what do you make of it? What do you make of this Deadspin article on this poor kid?
Well, you know, it's a shame that he happens to live in Kansas City or the Kansas City area, and so his team is the Chiefs, and so he actually admires Native Americans, and he's wearing the headdress because he wants the Chiefs to win, and the Chiefs are called the Chiefs out of admiration for the courage and the tenacity and the perseverance and the strength of the Native Americans. But this guy at Deadspin is just characterizing all of that as hate, because he only has the racist paradigm of the left to view everything in. It's just like, actually, it's interesting that you started with Miguel Cardona, because he's part of the same problem. These people don't know anything. They only think in slogans and shibboleths and propaganda. And so Miguel Cardona thinks, well, the government takes care of everything. Of course, that's the way it ought to be. And so he can't imagine that Ronald Reagan could have been actually criticizing that idea. And the Deadspin writer can't imagine that anybody could actually be white and admire a Native American. It just doesn't fit their paradigm. Neither of them know any real history. Neither of them have any appreciation for our actual national heritage and culture. And so we get this kind of madness. And the problem is, it would be comical, except that real people like this kid suffer as a result of it.
That they do. And you go back 15, 20 years or more, right? The left was always saying that if you don't engage with other cultures, that by itself, by default, then makes you racist. You need to diversify what you eat and the kind of culture that you see and the shows that you go to and all the rest.